Chapter 7. Exterminate the Mormons. We hold ourselves at all times in readiness to exterminate, utterly exterminate, the wicked and abominable Mormon leaders, the authors of our troubles. A war of extermination should be waged. Resolutions passed by citizens of Warsaw, DHC 6464. The goal of good government should be to improve the welfare and happiness of the people over whom it rules. Its laws should aid them in obtaining their necessities and offer protection of lives and property. It should provide an atmosphere that brings out the best in people and that treats them all equally. Justice should be blended with mercy, but oppressors should not escape punishment. Here in America, that dream should have been realized, but instead men have been overcome by temptations, weaknesses and desires for power conditions, which seem to exist in all governments. With the restoration of a kingdom of light came all the corresponding powers of a kingdom of darkness. Within 50 years of the birth of the American nation, mortal and spiritual forces began to destroy it. However, the devil can do nothing unless human agencies do his bidding. Men in all the various guises of political, religion and social arenas became agents of evil. The Mormon people, without much effort on their part, had caused hatred to develop among Gentile priests and politicians alike. On July 20, 1833, a force of over 500 of the opposition gathered at the town hall in Independence, Missouri. They appealed to the state government to remove the Saints from Jackson County. They warned the Mormons that they must sell all their property and leave. This aroused more mob wrath and hatred, resulting in mobbing, burning, whipping, raping and murdering. Governor Boggs was no help. He, too, told the Mormons they must leave the county. The prophet Joseph Smith described these events. In the course of this day's wicked, outrageous, and unlawful proceedings tarring and feathering at Independence, many solemn realities of human degradation, as well as thrilling incidents, were presented to the Saints. An armed and well-organized mob in a government professing to be governed by law, with the Lieutenant Governor, Lilburn W. Boggs, the second officer in the state, calmly looking on and secretly aiding every movement, saying to the Saints, "You now know what our Jackson boys can do, and you must leave the county and all the justices, judges, constables, sheriffs, and military officers, headed by such Western missionaries and clergymen as the Reverends McCoy, Kavanaugh, Hunter, Fitzhugh, Pixley, Likens, and Lovelady, consisting of Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians, and all the different sects of religionists that inhabited that country, with that great moral reformer and register of the land office at Lexington 40 miles east, known as the head and father of the Cumberland Presbyterians, even the Reverend Finis Ewing, publicly publishing that Mormons were the common enemies of mankind, and ought to be destroyed all. These solemn realities were enough to melt the heart of a savage, while there was not a solitary offense on record or proof that a saint had broken the law of the land. DHC 1391-392. By the winter of 1833 the violence had increased until the Saints had to take up arms to protect themselves. The result of these clashes caused Lieutenant Governor Lilburn Boggs to send in the state militia on November 4, and to disarm both sides, but it was only the Mormons who gave up their guns. The Saints were thus mobbed and persecuted worse than ever until they fled the country in desperation. Parley P. Pratt described the scene. The shore of the Missouri began to be lined on both sides of the ferry with men, women, and children, goods, wagons, boxes, provisions, etc., while the ferry was constantly employed, and when night closed upon us, the Cottonwood Bottom had much the appearance of a camp meeting. Hundreds of people were seen in every direction, some in tents and some in the open air around fires, where the rain descended in torrents. Husbands were inquiring for their wives, wives for their husbands, parents for children, and children for parents. The scene was indescribable and, I am sure, would have melted the hearts of any people on earth, except our blind oppressors and a blind and ignorant community. Autobiography of Parley P. Pratt, 1980 PB ed., page 102. The Saints settled in Clay County, but were told that they could stay there only temporarily. Within 2 years their numbers increased so much that the original settlers demanded that they move on. From there they went to the upper part of Ray County, which was very sparsely settled at that time. By 1837 they dedicated a place for their temple. Meanwhile, in Kirtland, Ohio, the Saints were also having problems of apostasy and persecution. Added to these troubles was the financial crash of 1837, caused by the abundance of paper money. The notes had no legal value as currency and were rejected by their creditors. The prophet explained, "It seemed as though all the powers of earth and hell were combining their influence in an especial manner to overthrow the church at once and make a final end. DHC 2487. The saints were forced to abandon their homes, lands, and their temple. The Mormon settlements in northern Missouri grew quickly, and by 1838, there were over 15,000 members. Once again, this caused concern among the Missourians. In August, a group of Mormons went to cast their votes, but were met by a mob who tried to prevent them from casting their ballots. A fight ensued and the mob left, but only long enough to gather more numbers and strength. They began a constant battle of robbery, raping, beatings, and burning. Most of the persecutions were directed at the Mormons merely because they were Mormons. The people in the surrounding areas acted as if they had been seriously injured and clamored for the public officials to destroy the Mormons. On August 30, 1838, a petition from people in Daviess and Livingston counties was sent to Governor Boggs, calling the Mormons impostors, rebels, Canadian refugees, emissaries of the Prince of Darkness. The prophet Joseph said it contained all the falsehoods and lies that the evil genius of mobocrats, villains, and murderers could invent, charging the Mormons apostrophe with every crime they themselves had been guilty of. DHC 376. But what could a comparatively small group of people do when they are overpowered by so many more wicked people? The saints first retaliated by sending a petition to Governor Boggs, which said in part, whereas your petitioners have on the 20th instant been sorely aggrieved by being beset by a lawless mob, certain inhabitants of this and other counties, to the injury of the good citizens of this and the adjacent places, that on the aforesaid day, there came from 100 to 150 armed men, and threatened with force and violence, to drive certain peaceable citizens from their homes, in defiance of all law, and threatened then to drive said citizens out of the county, but, on deliberation, concluded to give them, said citizens, till the 1st of October next, to leave said county, and threatened, if not gone by that time, to exterminate them, without regard to age or sex, and destroy their chattels, by throwing them into the river. DHC 382. Nevertheless, in October, Governor Boggs issued what has become known as the Exterminating Order. Governor Boggs' Exterminating Order. Headquarters Militia, City of Jefferson. October 27, 1838. Sir, since the order of the morning to you, directing you to cause 400 mounted men to be raised within your division, I have received by Amos Rees Esquire, and Wiley C. Williams Esquire, one of my aides, information of the most appalling character, which changes the whole face of things, and places the Mormons in the attitude of open and avowed defiance of the laws, and of having made open war upon the people of this state. Your orders are, therefore, to hasten your operations and endeavor to reach Richmond, in Ray County, with all possible speed. The Mormons must be treated as enemies, and must be exterminated or driven from the state, if necessary, for the public good. DHC 3175. Generals Alexander Doniphan and David R. Atchison had both been trying to stop the mobs from attacking the Mormon settlements. When Boggs' extermination order came to them, Atchison resigned his commission. In a letter to the governor, he said he would not disgrace himself or permit the troops under his command to disgrace the state by acting as part of a mob. Doniphan also refused to carry out the order. However, Gen. Samuel D. Lucas, under the command of Gen. Clark, brought the state militia to Far West, where the Mormons were put under arrest and forced to give up their arms. This was followed by heinous crimes upon the saints, looting, ransacking, beating unarmed men, and ravishing their wives and daughters. On the night of November 1st, Gen. Lucas ordered a court-martial for Joseph Smith and 4 others on the charge of treason, and they were sentenced to be shot at sunrise in the public square of Far West, as an example to the rest of the saints. Lucas sent the following order to Gen. Doniphan. Brigadier General Doniphan, Sir, you will take Joseph Smith and the other prisoners into the public square of Far West, and shoot them at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Signed, Samuel D. Lucas, Major General Commanding. CHC 1489-490. But Doniphan returned a reply to Lucas. Major General Lucas, Sir, it is cold-blooded murder. I will not obey your order. My brigade shall march for liberty tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and if you execute these men, I will hold you responsible before an earthly tribunal, so help me God. CHC 1490. The Mormons claimed they knew firsthand that Boggs, Clark, Lucas, Wilson, Gilliam, and King had committed treason against the citizens of Missouri, expelling them from the state. These men were the principal cause of murdering nearly 450 men, women, and children, then forcing the remainder of nearly 15,000 others to leave the state in the dead of winter. All the while the Mormons thought that the Constitution and its government would protect them from such savagery. Although they were not executed, Joseph and the others were imprisoned throughout the winter until the summer of 1839, when they were able to make their escape into Illinois. By then most of the saints had left Missouri and had settled in Illinois. The days were cold and bleak, but the clamor for the instant removal of the Mormons was so great that the old and young, and sick and feeble, delicate women and suckling children, almost without food and clothing, were compelled to abandon their homes and firesides, to seek new homes in a distant state. Mormonism, Americanism and Politics. Richard Vitterly, page 95. George A. Smith reported that the Latter-day Saints paid the United States government some $318,000 for land in the state of Missouri, but yet, in the winter and early spring of 1839, they were expelled from that state, with the entire loss of their lands and improvements, and most of their personal property, under an extermination order from Lilburn W. Boggs, governor of that state, J.D. 1379. Even after the Mormons had left the state, the Missourians would not give up their fight against them. They tried to extradite Joseph Smith, and several times tried to kidnap him. Other church members had been kidnapped and taken into Missouri to be beaten. Opposition from New York, Ohio, Missouri and now Illinois continued. However, reasons for persecution in Illinois became more apparent than in the other states. Many politicians planned for the death of Joseph Smith. It was rumored that a strong political party numbering in its ranks, many of the prominent men of the nation, were engaged in a plot for the overthrow of Joseph Smith. Rise and Fall of Nauvoo. B. H. Roberts, page 404. In addition, over 200 apostates in Nauvoo plotted and planned for the prophet's death, such as John the 100th. Bennett, William and Wilson Law, Francis and Chauncey Higbee, and Robert and Charles Foster. Why were both church apostates and government traitors plotting the death of Joseph Smith? Helen Mar Whitney explained. It was the popularity of Joseph as candidate for the presidency, and the power and influence that the Mormon people were gaining, that created a feeling of fear among the apostates and corrupt politicians, and a deeper hatred took possession of their hearts, similar to that which was felt by the Jews towards Jesus Christ, and like them, they were determined to put an end to his earthly career. Woman's Exponent, 11-114. Thus, it was not just plural marriage that caused Joseph Smith and other leaders so much trouble and persecution, as George Q. Cannon stated. It is not plural marriage alone in the minds of hundreds, and I may say thousands, who have examined this question. There is something more than this, there is something behind this, something that is greater than this, and that is the organization of the people, the union of the people. That which many men call the theocracy of this organization. It was that which excited the mob in the earliest days of the organization. In other words, you must break up. We cannot endure your organization, your coming together and being united as you are. We fear you will take possession of our principal counties, and your political influence will be so great that in time you will hold control of this country, and we cannot endure it, and you must go. J.D. 24-103-104. LDS Apostates published a periodical in Nauvoo called the Nauvoo Expositor, which demanded the repeal of the Nauvoo Charter and the dissolution of their government. It presented a difficult situation for the saints. If they destroyed the press, charges of freedom of the press would be an excuse for the mobbers to retaliate. If the press were allowed to continue, then the material it contained would arouse the mobbers even more. It was a no-win dilemma. It was decided the press would be destroyed by the city council and then all hell broke loose. The Warsaw Signal newspaper editorialized, "War and extermination is inevitable. Citizens arise, one and all. Can you stand by and suffer such infernal devils to rob men of their property and rights, without avenging them? We have no time to comment. Every man will make his own. Let it be made with powder and ball." Warsaw Signal, June 12, 1844. As a result of the press destruction in Nauvoo, a mass meeting was held in Carthage to make some resolutions, one of which was, in part, "We must not only defend ourselves from danger, but we must resolutely carry the war into the enemy's camp. We do therefore declare that we will hold ourselves at all times in readiness to cooperate with our fellow citizens in this state, Missouri, and Iowa to exterminate, utterly exterminate, the wicked and abominable Mormon leaders, the authors of our troubles, that the prophet and his miscreant adherents should then be demanded at their hands, and, if not surrendered, a war of extermination should be waged to the entire destruction, if necessary for our protection, of his adherents." DHC 6-463-464. Isn't it strange that the common people, Christian ministers and local and state government officials, would all join forces to persecute and destroy a Christian people who had done no one any harm? Very few of these persecutors even knew any Mormons personally. but yet they eagerly jumped for their guns and were anxious for a chance to kill them. If Joseph Smith had started just another regular Christian church, he would not have had any persecution. If he had entered the political arena with just another ordinary platform, he would have undoubtedly gained popularity. But his restoration of the fullness of Christ's gospel was instantly met with persecution, and his explanation of God's government resulted in his death. Introducing the kingdom of God is the same as a declaration of war to the kingdom of the devil. Joseph Smith lived only a few months after he organized God's kingdom on earth. But to create a war, the devil needs mortal soldiers to do his dirty deeds of persecution, war, and murder. As a result, Joseph Smith became the victim of many local, state, and federal government conspiracies, assisted by mobs, ministers, Masons, and Mormons. It has been said that whether those persecuted are right or wrong, the persecutors are always wrong. But unfortunately, here in America, under the banner of the Constitution, some of the worst conspiracies and murders have occurred in this land of the free.